Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Super excited for this video as we're going to talk about some player movement that I would like to see this offseason. Now if you're new to Utility Sports, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let's not waste any more time here and talk about this video. We're going to talk about 5 players I want to see on a new team, and the reasoning behind it is super important. This is going to address fit or need for the specific team, and I also think this is going to be beneficial for both the team and the individual player. This isn't just a video time about, oh, I want player X to go play with player Y. These are calculated decisions that I have thought about for a very long time. This is a video that I've been planning for about a month or so, given the trade deadline was just about a month ago as well. Since then, I've been thinking and looking at, hey, this team needs this team could use that. And some of these players are probably going to be available, whether that be through free agency or via trade this offseason. So we're going to talk about all of those players in this video that I think would be benefited by playing in a new system, and I think that system would be benefited by incorporating that new player. So this is more than just I want to see this guy go team up with this dude. It's a basketball X's and O's schematic video that discusses why these guys would fit together really well. And yes, there are some big names in here, but it's not just because they're big names. It's because I think they actually do make good, legitimate sense from a basketball perspective. And the first team I want to talk about is the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans are a very interesting team this season. I think Willie Green's doing a good job with that team. They're currently 5th in the Western Conference at the time I'm recording this, and they have a lot of scoring already on their roster. They have obviously Zion Williamson, who is the top dog on their roster, super athletic. And you have guys like Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, 2 mid-range killers, mid-range assassins, both able to create their own shot. And for the longest time, if you would have asked me what do I think New Orleans needs to supplement the roster around Zion Williamson from the starting center position, I would have definitely highlighted a shooting big man, someone who can space the floor. However, my thoughts have changed on that this year, given their hiring of James Borrego, the overall offensive adjustment that they've made to running more of a zoom-styled offense where there's a lot of dribble handoffs, the center standing at the top of the key a ton. You might think, well, wouldn't the shooting be really beneficial then if the center's standing out on the three-point line? Not quite. I actually think that they should go a different direction. And a player that I think could become available depending on how the postseason goes this year is Jarrett Allen of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think Allen is a perfect fit, a seamless fit into New Orleans roster. I know there's already been some rumors about Jarrett Allen, but I think there is really good reason for New Orleans to explore Allen in New Orleans. When I'm thinking about their zoom offense, and you're going to see some clips throughout this video as well of Zion Williamson attacking downhill, what you're going to notice, not even just Zion, but when Jonas Valanciunas is running dribble handoffs, he doesn't roll very hard. He's not the most downhill athletic big man in the league. Now, he's a very good post-up player. He does shoot the ball a little bit, but I think that they're missing some downhill juice from their handoff guy. And if you have someone at the center spot who's able to hand the ball off and roll downhill hard and quickly, it's going to open up a lot of different things in their offense, especially for other players on the team like Ingram, like McCollum, like Jordan Hawkins, who's an absolute sniper. So I think for me, if I was New Orleans, I'd look at a player like Jarrett Allen, who ranks towards the top of the league in cuts. And a lot of those are, of course, without the basketball, diving to the rim. He's really adept in that area, one of the best in the entire association. But he's also just a flat-out really good pick-and-roll man. And I think if you're looking at New Orleans again a year ago, I would have said, I'd prefer for this team to get a shooting big man. I think my philosophy on that has completely changed given the way that they are playing their offense this year. And I think someone like Jarrett Allen would really help New Orleans in the half court on both ends of the floor. Obviously, he's a stout defender. I think he holds his own as a rim protector. But then on the offensive end, I think he is a very good fit as a screener, someone who's going to, I think, open up a lot of things in their offense by being a good roll man. I think it's going to open up more corner three-pointers for them. And then when you ask about what is the price point to get him, well, first of all, New Orleans has a collection of draft picks. They still own some of Milwaukee's picks from the Drew Holiday trade. They still own a Lakers pick from the Anthony Davis trade, so they have a surplus of picks. They also have someone like Herb Jones, who I think would be a really fascinating player to get back if you're Cleveland, because of where he likely finishes in all defense this year. Cleveland could kind of pivot to Evan Mobley playing center with maybe Herb Jones playing at power forward, and then you also see Isaac Okoro playing small forward. So they could build one of the best defensive front courts in the entire association and maybe get some draft pick capital in return. Now, Pelicans fans are going to say, whoa, we don't want to give up Herb Jones and picks for Jarrett Allen. Trust me, Allen is the better player. He's an extremely good player, and I think he would help New Orleans a lot. I think it's a pretty balanced trade. I think Cleveland probably would maximize Evan Mobley that way as well. And again, this is kind of dependent on how the postseason goes. If the Cavaliers make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals, you could probably say this trade's not going to happen. But if they maybe lose pretty badly in the second round or somehow have a first round collapse like they did last year against New York where they just did not play very well, then all of a sudden you're looking at this as a very realistic possibility. I think New Orleans would be the best team to kind of capture Jarrett Allen and his skill set. Going on to our next team, it is the Memphis Grizzlies, who have been very active in the past couple of months. They traded away Steven Adams. They have made a bunch of other moves as well on the margins. Now remember, back to this offseason, they traded for Marcus Smart. So they're still a team that I think is in position to contend. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has taken a big step forward this season. Desmond Bane, in the time that he's been on the court this year, has shown some improvements as an on-ball scorer. And I think once you have Ja Morant back, I think going into next season, the Grizzlies are still going to be a real threat in the Western Conference. The big question is, how do they go about kind of replacing Steven Adams, the center minutes? Brandon Clark will, of course, be a big part of that. But I think a player that makes a ton of sense for them, that will be an unrestricted free agent this offseason, is Nick Claxton. Given the fact that he was a second-round pick on the old second-round pick draft rules, he is not going to be a restricted free agent this offseason. He is an unrestricted free agent, and Brooklyn really does run the risk of losing him here potentially for nothing. Now, it's possible that Memphis could offer some type of sign-and trade to help kind of deter the Nets from just flat out paying Nick Claxton themselves. And I think the reason that this player makes a ton of sense for Memphis is the defensive side and just getting some more size, rebounding, and again, another good roll man with a really nice 7, 8, 9 foot touch shot, little push shot from right outside the restricted area. That's something that Nick Claxton has down pat. So I think if you're looking at it from a skill perspective offensively, he can give you just a little bit of spacing around the rim, and it's a unique kind of spacing, right? It's not standing out on the three-point line. It's not being a mid-range shooter. It's a nice little push shot, gives Ja Morant a little bit more room to operate in the lane, but still gives you a screen setter, someone who can dive hard, finish around the rim, finish above the rim, which is important. But really the defensive side is what really matters here, thinking about where Memphis could dominate teams. If you have Marcus Smart on the floor with Jaren Jackson Jr., 2 former defensive players of the year, and then Nick Claxton, a player who I think has the potential to maybe earn one himself in the coming years, you have a really unique defensive identity. One of the best chase defenders in the league in Marcus Smart. You can play and drop with either Jaren or Claxton. And with that too, you can also be more aggressive when you have both of them on the floor. You can blitz more ball screens because you have 2 rim protectors on the court instead of 1. So having Nick Claxton be the low man and he can rotate over and block a shot, or having Jaren Jackson Jr. be the low man and rotate over while Nick Claxton's involved in the pick and roll, maybe blitzing or hard hedging, you have more optionality defensively for Taylor Jenkins. I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for this Grizzlies team to maybe take a step forward defensively while still, I think, giving you more offensive talent than what you had in Steven Adams. Even though offensive rebounding, listen, he's a great player. Steven Adams, I was surprised that they traded him. I think he's a really awesome player, but I think Nick Claxton would be an upgrade long-term for the Grizzlies given his age and also given his talent level currently. Let's talk about the Orlando Magic, the third team here on this list, and I think Orlando is one of the most fascinating teams in the NBA right now. They are playing extremely well, and Jamal Mosley deserves a lot of credit. He has done a fantastic job kind of building out this team and building out a team identity where they defend very hard. They do a good job utilizing their length, cutting off driving lanes. They have one of the most unique defenders in the entire NBA in Jonathan Isaac. Jalen Suggs, I think, is going to be one of the better players in the league at some point. I really think there's a lot for him to continue improving on and working on. I think this year's been a tremendous growth year for him, and I think there's going to be a lot to build on off of that. And then, of course, at the top of the roster, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are 2 really high-level wings. Now, I think the issue, though, when you look at Orlando is the point guard spot, and there's a lot of questions right now about who their long-term starting point guard is. Markelle Fultz is a free agent at the end of the season. How do they go about either keeping him, re-signing him, or do they maybe look to move on from him and address the point guard spot in a different way? And I think one big issue is the lack of shooting on the overall roster and specifically at the point guard spot. Anfernee Black, a player that I loved coming out of Arkansas, I think he was a very good draft pick for Orlando, but at the same time, with all of his positives, his length, size, ability to take care of the basketball, run an offense, he doesn't shoot the ball extremely well. Now, he's shooting it decently in his rookie season, but I think that someone with gravity would go a long way in changing Orlando's long-term outlook. And a player who is from Florida, Anfernee Simons, I think makes a ton of sense. As Portland is rebuilding right now, they have a bunch of players who likely become available this offseason for trade. Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and maybe, just maybe, Anfernee Simons, who's had a real breakout season this year in the absence of Damian Lillard. I don't think anyone's really surprised by it. I know a lot of Blazers fans were expecting it, and Orlando Magic fans would love to have this guy on their roster. It gives them one more offensive creator, someone who can get his own shot off, and I think the real big difference for him compared to Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, who are a little bit more reliant on mid-range jump shots or getting all the way to the rim, Anfernee Simons is very comfortable pulling up for three out of the pick and roll. So this gives you just a little bit more gravity out to the three-point line. I think it's going to open up driving lanes just a bit more. He's been very efficient this year on spot-up opportunities, shooting over 43% from three in spot-up situations. So you're looking at a player who I think is going to do a good job functioning without the basketball. We've seen that a ton from him early in his career playing next to Damian Lillard, but at the same time, I think he's someone who is capable of running an offense when either Banchero and or Wagner are off the floor. You have someone else who you can give the ball to, let him go to work. And from a trade perspective, the Magic still are working with the surplus of picks themselves. They have that 2025 Denver first. They also still have Anfernee Black to trade. Jett Howard could be in the trade. They have a collection of young pieces that I think Portland would value in return for Simons. So I think Orlando is one of the few teams that not only does it make sense to go in for Simons from an actual roster standpoint, because they need a point guard who can stretch the floor, shoot, handle, and create offense for himself, but they also are one of the few teams that actually have the draft picks and the assets to probably get involved in an Anfernee Simons trade, because it's not like the Blazers are going to be shopping him, but I think they would be receptive to trade offers, and I think Orlando is one of the few teams that could really pry that door open this offseason. Let's talk now about San Antonio, and this is a player who, this just makes way too much sense. From a gravity perspective, just exactly what we talked about with Anfernee Simons, let's upgrade that to about double of his capabilities, especially with the range perspective and his overall talent as a facilitator. If you're looking for a point guard to put next to Victor Wembanyama, I don't think there's going to be a better option available this offseason than Trae Young of the Atlanta Hawks, and I would like to see him in a San Antonio Spurs jersey. He's one of the more underrated players around the league, and I understand some of the criticism around him. He is smaller. There are going to be some defensive limitations, and offensively, people don't like the heliocentric style of play where a player has the ball in his hands all the time. But imagine a two-man game between Trae Young and Victor Wembanyama, one of the deepest shot creators, one of the deepest range shot creators in the NBA, playing with a 7'4" freak. I think that their pick and roll game would become one of the most dynamic in the entire NBA, similar to what we've seen from Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, and obviously what we saw from James Harden with Joel Embiid in years past. A player like Trae Young, who is a very adept passer, a lot of that comes on long rolls right now with lobs to Capella, dump-offs to Onyeka Okongwu. I think that right now, what Trae Young has shown as a facilitator makes me really comfortable believing that he's also going to be a high-level short roll passer, and he's done that on occasion, obviously a little bit with Jalen Johnson this year, but I think with Victor Wembanyama, you're looking at an all-new level that San Antonio could get to, where if you're going to blitz Trae Young in the pick and roll, good luck, because he's going to fit a little tight window pass into Victor Wembanyama, who's going to be catching around the top of the key or maybe around the free throw line. And then all of a sudden, he's walking into a 4-on-3 situation, and with how long, athletic, and big he is and skilled he is, he's going to finish those off at a super high volume. So you're looking at a player here in Trae Young who, listen, I know people aren't the biggest believer in what he is. I think he's become criminally underrated. I think he's a player who honestly could really provide a high level play to a championship caliber team as the number 2 guy, as the number 1 player is probably going to be taxing and challenging for him. But All-Star Weekend, Trae Young, I think, expressed his kind of belief in Victor Wembanyama a bunch. And I think from an actual offensive standpoint, it makes a ton of sense. And also, going back to when Atlanta nearly traded for Rudy Gobert, there were a ton of rumors that offseason before Gobert got traded to Minnesota. I've wrapped my mind around what a player like Gobert would look like next to Trae Young. A really high-level defender, rim protector, someone with a ton of length and shot blocking. Well, now let's upgrade that to Victor Wembanyama, who I think is going to become one of the best defenders to ever play in the NBA with the type of functionality he gives you in the pick and roll defensively. You can run nearly any scheme with him. I think as he reaches his potential, especially right now, obviously he's a rookie, he makes mistakes. But I think when his career really blossoms and he turns into the player that I know he's going to become, then you have a player who I think is going to be able to mask a lot of Trae Young's deficiencies defensively while still giving you an offensive juggernaut on the other end of the floor. I think Trae Young is going to be the best facilitator that Victor Wembanyama has ever played with, and all of a sudden San Antonio is cooking with gas. They have a collection of draft picks. They have some from Boston. They have a Dallas Mavericks 2030 pick swap, or 2029 pick swap, excuse me. Maybe it's 2030. I think it might be 2030. And they have also just a collection of other picks. They've got one from Chicago. They've got one from Toronto. So San Antonio, not only do they have the draft assets to do this, they have a high pick this year that would also help them, and they have some other young pieces they could throw back to Atlanta to maybe facilitate some type of trade. I think it's a really fascinating combination and pairing, and one that I want to see happen really badly for San Antonio. Then we move into the final team here in the video, and that is the Houston Rockets. And this is the team I wanted to talk about most in this video. And I know people are going to say, whoa, Trae Young to San Antonio wasn't the one that got you the most excited. Listen, I'm very excited about that one. But this is the one that really stands out to me as a match made in heaven for a team that really needs to improve in one specific or two specific areas. This player provides both of those things at an all-time level, and that is Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors. Now, I know some Rockets fans are already going to be disgusted and in the comment section saying, we don't want Klay, we hate Klay Thompson, obviously from the long-term Rockets and Warriors beef during the mid-2010s and late 2010s, but Klay Thompson's such a perfect fit in Houston. I know people are going to say, oh my gosh, Klay Thompson's washed, this, that, and the other thing. They don't know ball if they're saying that. Klay Thompson is still one of the most adept off-ball movement shooters in the entire NBA. And I think if you look at what Houston doesn't have, which is spot-up shooting and movement shooting, getting Klay Thompson completely changes the gravity on the floor. Houston does not move very well without the basketball. That is partially Ime Udoka's fault. The coaching hasn't been there on the offensive end of the floor. The Rockets have been in the 20s all year long from an offensive efficiency standpoint. I think Klay Thompson, who is an extreme high-volume three-point shooter, would change the way that Houston's offensive dynamism looks. I think they would get way more three-point shot attempts up per game, which would definitely help with their shot diet, which is currently a little reliant on pull-up jump shots. And if you're looking at a player who's going to fit off of Alperen Şengün, I think that someone like Klay Thompson makes a ton of sense. You can run dribble handoffs with him, and Klay Thompson is one of the few players that you want rising up into an immediate dribble handoff pull-up three-pointer. He's also someone who's very adept off of screens. If you look at his numbers this year, working off of screens, off-ball screens specifically, you're going to see a ton of volume. He's actually the most volume player in the league in that regard, and he's extremely productive still in it from a points per possession standpoint. So I think if you're looking to upgrade Houston's offense, generating more ball movement, generating more off-ball movement, and player movement would be huge for them. Klay Thompson's the player that really stands out to me. He's a free agent this offseason. The Rockets can waive Jock Landale, save $8 million there, and they have other ways to open up a little bit of money. I think Klay Thompson could be the long-term small forward for the Houston Rockets beside Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green. Obviously, Cam Whitmore is there waiting in the wings. Dylan Brooks is already currently on the roster. The Rockets have ways to shuffle things around here. They have Amen Thompson as well. VanVleet technically becomes an expiring contract next year if they want to look at it that way. So it's definitely possible to fit Klay Thompson into your books. And I think the skill set he provides while still being a defensive-minded guy. I think his defense has slipped quite a bit, but he's a comfortable defender. He works hard on that end of the floor, and he offers at least decent size and length for the position. Houston doesn't really sacrifice too much of their defense. They bring more pace into their offense. They bring more movement into their offense. And the biggest thing is just flat out more shooting. And it's not just, oh, he's going to connect on 38% of his catch and shoots. It's teams fear this guy. Teams see Klay Thompson on the scouting report and say, oh my gosh, we have to stay attached to him. Otherwise, he could light us up for 18 points in a quarter on 6 3-pointers. So I think with that, Houston completely changes their offensive identity. They really improve in an area they need to without sacrificing their defensive improvements that they've made this year. I think it's an overall win for the Houston Rockets. Now, from Klay's perspective, I don't know if this is as much of a win for him. I think playing his whole career out in Golden State is a good story, and obviously staying in the city that drafted you is obviously a great thing for his own individual career as well, from a fan base enjoyment perspective. But if Klay does move on to a different situation, I think Houston's the team that could use him more than anybody else around the league. I really hope you guys did enjoy this video. Again, it was a lot of fun to talk about the X's and O's and scheme behind some of the player movement that I would like to see this offseason. It's not just about putting player X with player Y. It's about building a team that actually fits and the roster that correlates with each other, building some chemistry and scheme identity, and I think all of these 5 moves would fit that pretty well. Again, I hope you guys did enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.